For the record, I pre-ordered the special edition of this. I regret my purchase. Slight spoilers to this game since I'm going to be covering the first 7 zones and showing off every single Chaos Emerald ability. Oh, and Supersonic, but I'm pretty sure everyone knows that you get Supersonic with all 7 Chaos Emeralds. I won't be covering Zone 8 and onwards because I don't have the blood pressure to talk about those zones. Plus, I'll only be talking about the actual main mode of the game, so no mentioning the battle mode or any other extra stuff. But I feel like I should mention this firsthand. This Epic Games online thing is completely optional and doesn't impact anything outside of the online battle mode. And the DRM doesn't ruin the game's performance at all from what I've experienced. Oh, by the way, if you notice frame drops, that's just my PC being bad at being a PC when I use OBS. I've seen a lot of these complaints on Steam and I just really want to point those out. Now, without further ado, let's talk about the actual this menu music. Why did they have to hire June to make more Sonic 4 music? It's extremely jarring and a really short loop, so please, someone at Sega tell June to use something other than the fake Genesis sound. Also, the default keyboard controls are weird, and I heavily suggest you play with a controller. Bridge Island Zone, otherwise known as Green Hill, but it's not Green Hill, and it's literally just Green Hill. What do I have to say about the zone? It's a really simple beginner zone that you can easily speed through and introduces stuff that you'll be seeing throughout the entire game. Like these portals which bring you to Coin Heaven, except the coins are replaced with rings and it's really short. They also bring you somewhere else in the level. Special stage rings from Free K and Mania are back, but this one is placed in an obvious spot so that you can get the first emerald to experience the game's main gimmick. I'll talk about both of those things in a bit. There's no lives, but you get medals with every 100 ring you collect, and there's hidden medals for you to snag and bonus stages for them. But yeah, it's classic Sonic alright, just in 2.5D with graphics that I'm absolutely in love with. It really captures what I like about simple designs, and has really smooth animations with some neat details here and there. And the backgrounds are pretty cool to look at when you just stop and take a look. Most of the time. There's also occasional background detail, which is just neat. And to those who are worried about the physics being horrible, no they aren't. It feels nearly the same as Mania, almost 1-to-1. Extremely responsive and snappy, absolute dream to control, though I'd prefer if the camera was a bit more zoomed out, or a way to control the camera, you know, to justify the price. But it's not too bad. I can mostly react to stuff coming at me when I'm not running at full speed. I am getting off track and not actually talking about Bridge Island, aren't I? The first act is pretty simple, feels like every other first level in every Sonic game. The main gimmick of this level is running on the walls, which don't come up later on, and these speed ramp things which will show up in other zones, but it's super prevalent here. There's not really much going on in Act 1, so you can just run around this pretty open area and listen to the great music. Fun fact, this was composed by June and then finalized by Telops to not have Sonic 4 instruments, thank God. Before we hop into the scripted sequence, let's quickly talk about the first special stage. The first special stage gives you 90 rings and basically hands you the first emerald for free. Collecting Chaos Emeralds in this game gives you a power respective to each emerald. With the first one, you get Avatar. It's just a really slow screen nuke that can kill off badniks, break monitors, grab rings, or deal damages to a boss for you. Keep in mind your emerald power will end prematurely if you ever get hit, and once you've used an ability once, you won't be able to use that power again until you reach a checkpoint. Now back to scripted fish chase where you run in a straight line, and I beat this first try on my first playthrough in this level. Onwards to Act 2. Immediately, the stage takes on a different lighting and has a more upbeat theme backing it up. I love this aesthetic a lot, and it really hammers in how nice the graphics could look. Act 2 introduces slingshots and ring givers. Yeah, there's not much here that really... Oh... So the first boss is relatively easy to figure out. It's got somewhat slow and telegraph attacks, and you can bonk the egg on the head several times. Not a bad first boss, but it introduces one of the worst tracks in all of Superstars. Someone please tell June to stop using Sonic 4 instruments for God's sake. I like the small detail where the character stands up for fights though. Onwards to the jungle! Just kidding, let's talk about the hub world first. It's kinda neat that some stage gimmicks get added into the hub as you unlock zones, but there's not much to note here, other than the shop for absurdly overpriced robot parts for the battle mode character that you can use. Also, June's Sonic 4 music returns once again, but it's less ear-bleeding than the other two tracks I mentioned earlier. Anyway, actually into the jungle now. Right away, we are introduced into some of T-Lopes' music, which is really good by the way, and the gimmicks of the stage. These pulley vine things that send you upwards, vine grind rails that your character will start sliding on whenever you reach a certain speed, bandits that fly in from off-screen so you have to quickly jump away to avoid them, these... what do we even call these? Thing that happens in Stardust Speedway? Yeah, close enough. And these little hooks that you can run on by touching these switches. Of course, as the level name implies, it heavily leans on the speed. You can easily blast through the entire level without leaving much behind. Once you reach the end of a stage, watching Tails murder a few robots in the background, you meet... a giant mosquito. This is where the game introduces mini-bosses to you. This fella over here will try to hook you with the grappling hooks that you use to traverse through the act, but since you're a small hedgehog whom go fast, you can dodge this guy and immediately drop dash straight into its face. After it gets hit, it will move on to the next screen, where it will start tossing electric balls at you. Before doing the same thing, you bonk it, it flies off screen. Again. Now, there's spikes in the floor, before this mosquito decides to do the exact same thing, but more. But this time, instead of hooking you, this idiot slowly flies down onto where you are and you can just bonk it for being stupid like that. And that's Speed Jungle Act 1. Also, you get to choose which act you want to go next. These are character acts, and are basically side levels which force you to be a specific character, in this case, Sonic. The levels in question are usually built around the character the game picks for you, and since I play Sonic the most anyway, I'll just head over there before playing Act 2. Okay, Speed Jungle Act Sonic. This song was composed by Takahiro Kai, I think that's how you pronounce that. It doesn't give off the same vibe as Act 1, but it's not bad. How unfortunate that this theme is super forgettable because it keeps getting cut off by... Oh no. So, back again with even more Sonic 4 instruments is the most mediocre theme I've ever heard for a character. Obviously done by June, tell him to stop using these instruments. After this short chase, there's a special stage ring up here. Now this time the game actually tosses you into a real special stage, but you still have some room for error and rings are pretty easy to replenish. After getting the emerald, you get one of the best abilities in the game, a super spammable air dash while the emerald effects are still active. It's really good for navigating levels, fighting bosses, and just fun to use if you aren't using a keyboard. Back to being chased by Fang. Again. God, I really hate this theme. It's so repetitive. This guy on a literal flying scooter decides to actually toss stuff at you now, which is really telegraphed and really easy to dodge. You even get a whole platforming section with him tossing missiles at you. Nice aim, jackass! Eventually, you will end up with rocks in front of your path, and you have to spin jump into them. It's really tense until you realize Fang and the laser wall behind you is based on how fast you're going, so you can just have a casual stroll while these two things slowly move behind you. And Fang crashes in the trip like a complete goof. Whose trip, you may ask? Well, she's a it's quite dumb, and oh, I'm not meant to... Right, moving on to Act 2 now. Right off the bat, we are greeted by the new gimmicks the stage throws at you. These poles that you can swing onto, dark areas lit by glowing butterflies which seriously hammer in the visibility issue I mentioned earlier with the camera, and these vines which launch you higher up. It's more of the same admittedly fun level design with you blasting through the jungle at really high speeds, until the game tosses you in a completely dark area and you can barely see what's in front of you. Oh, and fun fact, this song was actually composed by Hidenori Soji, I think that's how it's pronounced. Sure, it doesn't feel like an Act 2 to what T-Lopes has given us, but it does fall in line with what Act Sonic has given us. Unfortunately, just like Act Sonic, it's not very memorable. Afterwards, we are greeted with the same Sonic 4 boss music and a giant black egg with arms where I can absolutely make a racist remark, which will get me cancelled on X the platform. This guy is completely immune to conventional damage. You have to trick Eggman into hitting himself with his own spike. Once you whittle down his health a bit, he gets very upset at you and tosses a sweeping move which is really hard to avoid, so I just abuse iframes. And now you have to start reflecting blue rockets back at him a la Studiopolis Act 1. Unlike Studiopolis though, you have to angle the rockets correctly, so the best bet is to stand directly below the boss. And then it decides to do the same attack as earlier with the spike. Honestly, Eggman's an idiot for letting Sonic and friends mash on him like this. After freeing the critters that Egg has abducted, you get caught in the fan and you get sent into... Right, these two. Yeah, it just really shows how Trip isn't very good at catching anyone and instead catches the person that she's working with. So we're sent to Sky Sanctuary Act 2. You can see Knuckles fly by in the background, these fans that lift you up into the air that you can then jump off. There's gusts of wind, which absolutely kill your momentum but prevent you from falling off the stage and dying. There's occasional segments where you get blown upwards and you have to navigate around them. These completely out-of-place breakout segments, which honestly kill the speed for me. And these rooms within temples with blocks that move, and then slowly collapse when you get off them. The only real memorable parts here is the fact that it's set in the sky, and this final section ripped straight out of Crisis City Act 1 from Generations. Just don't try to backtrack when the screen locks here. I'm not actually too sure who composed this, but the music fits the Sky Temple thing. But just like Speed Jungle Act Sonic and 2, it's really forgettable. After running past some robots from the battle mode, you fight the Egg again, cementing at how this is a single act zone. He starts off the fight by making you dodge saws while airborne, then after you land, it tosses you back up alongside some platforms using a giant fan. You have to navigate up there to hit Eggman. He repeats this pattern until his last two hits, where he decides to spin like a Beyblade and smack down on one of the platforms you're standing on. I don't think he accounted for how absurdly long the screen nuke lasts. Also, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about the special stage. It's got mines scattered around the place this time. If you home in on them, they will explode. They're mines. But if you release your homing attack early, you can use them to your advantage and gain some extra speed. There's not much else special here other than me getting the emerald on the last possible second. And you receive what I think is the worst ability in the game. Well, one of them. One of the worst ones. Vision. This allows you to show and interact with normally invisible platforms and rings. Do you see the problem as to how this has no use in a platformer built around speed? Fortunately, the game does tell you when to use this specific power, but it's still so situational that it's actually laughable. Let's get to the next stage. Immediately kicking us off with a really catchy beat, it's Carnival Night Act 3. No, really, this looks like Carnival Night Zone, but this zone immediately makes itself memorable with this backing track while you're being bounced around like a pinball. It's no SANDOPOLIS, but it's still really good. Oh, and the second act. We'll get to there when we get to there. As you can tell, it's Spring Yard, Casino, Carnival Night, but in 2.5D. I already see some reused mechanics, but I don't really mind. There's these little round targets that you can spin around and gain points. Get them all and you get rewarded with rings. There's this thing that it traps you in for a little bit before also rewarding you with rings. There's bumpers, pinball, whatever these are called, I actually don't know, and boosters that can launch you up into ring givers. There's also these spinny things that are very annoying to use. And let's quickly make a detour with this super gimmicky ability to get another super gimmicky ability. This special stage introduces walls that are damn near impossible to actually hit. Moving on now. Okay, just kidding. You get the water ability. There's no water in Pinball Carnival. It's useless in zones without any water. Yeah, it's just as useless as Vision. Anyway, boss time. Meet Bumper with a head on it. It's structured like the mosquito fight. You deal with the level's gimmick before bonking it on the head. I like this one better since it actually feels like you're using the level's gimmick against the boss here. All 3 phases are basically the same, and honestly this boss is a pushover. Next act. Oh, you already know this act is going to be good when you see the lighting change. Surprise! Act 2 completely throws a curveball at you and the stage is Halloween themed now. You're greeted to this rideable platform that goes really fast and then launches into the actual level. It's more of the same, but the theming really makes the zone feel, I don't know, more fun? Some bandits dress themselves up by putting up a blanket over their head. There's these pipes that take you to other parts of the zone, switches that switch up fire being sprayed. You're blowing up Eggman's building as the act progresses, these guys that don't even try to attack you but kick you around like a goddamn soccer ball, all while being complimented by this. I don't know why, but this theme immediately became my favorite track as soon as I heard it. It manages to remix the first act's theme into a Halloween-esque bop, and it's so cool to me. There's also these sections with moving platforms that require quick reaction time for you to avoid enemies and get to safety before falling to your death. I like this. I like it a lot. Unfortunately, we're met with one of the weaker bosses in the game. He gets demolished by Emerald abilities. Shocker. Just like how you can literally nuke Carnival Night Act 2's boss with Supersonic. He is very easy to take care of, and is memorable for how much of a pushover this is. Well, it's time to move on to the next zone. Oh, it's a water pipe. Okay, let's just get the negatives out of the way. This is visually the most boring zone so far. I really do not like the background. It's super generic and doesn't really have anything going on. Especially since we just ran past one of the more visually striking acts in the game. The lighting just feels off. It feels like everything's on Fulbright or something. Otherwise, this is a water zone with Act 1 barely having any water sections, rendering your own water ability in the water zone completely useless. So yeah, I went to the special stage, my controller ran out of power, I failed the special stage, tried to get back to the special stage ring while playing on my keyboard, immediately met with how these abilities aren't built with keyboard in mind, tried the special stage a couple more times, failed every time, gave up, opened the game later on with a charged controller, and beat the stage while feeling that I got this emerald out of pure luck. So yeah, screw this special stage and screw this emerald power. Yeah, you can create platforms and attack enemies from below with a spike. Problem is, bullet can be used to get around the stage better and also inflicts damage. The camera renders this ability useless because you can be hit while still growing these vines. Back to Hydrosity that's above ground. Not much to note here, other than you getting tossed around by water guns, slides, eels that pop up the floor, where Levisly said it looks like a dick. It's far more interesting in the second act. I honestly don't like Act 1 at all. Let's move on to pushover number 3. He dies very quickly to emerald powers because he's vulnerable no matter what. Also, attacks or super telegraph, you have to be an idiot to die to this guy. Hit the goalpost, watch a cutscene where Trip trips into a trap, and... So yeah, you remember how I mentioned that some acts were optional? Well, screw you! This is a forced character act. The only forced character act throughout the entire game, by the way. So immediately you can bonk fruit through your hammer and it raises this counter. I'm not sure what it does, but it's probably linked to an achievement. You are now playing as Sonic but on easy mode. Double jump with an infinitely weaker drop dash that makes you hit Matnix with a hammer. Also, this level is honestly really forgettable until you reach the halfway point. You have to carry Miss Accident Prone here and have to deal with a slower Amy. At least this end segment isn't that long and just leads to the end of a level. If you're wondering what new gimmicks there are outside of this fruit thing, there's a button that requires trip, but it's so linear at that point that it doesn't matter. Also, this background looks like a PNG. I hate it. Backing track is good though. Fits Amy perfectly. Just wish this zone didn't look like a broken Gary's mod map. Onwards to Act 2 and a shift in colors, and actual water sections this time. It's got a few annoying stage hazards and moving platforms, but this game makes sure you're not going to drown. You have these bubbles from Mania and some other game I forgot. Also, it's water's time to shine. You can move really quickly underwater and become immune to needing oxygen. Until it runs out. Don't have much to say about this act other than water, and a spit at the end where you bop open a wall to get thrown into a fight with this repetitive theme and abusing the emerald powers to turn this fight into a joke. Seriously, water, bullet, avatar just snaps all the challenge away. Also, Sonic's shoes clip into the floor here, easily cementing this as my least favorite zone so far. Let's quickly bounce off this snake tail and get to... SANDOPOLIS Act 3. It introduces these bandits, which are super annoying to deal with. Bandits literally ripped from SANDOPOLIS, mechanics from SANDOPOLIS, these guys, these things that don't even fit a desert-themed zone, and a giant snake coiling throughout the act that you can run on. And look, a ring literally in plain sight. This stage is honestly really easy. There's a lot of rings and bombs for you to just speed straight to the emerald. And what you get is... yeah, the jokes write themselves. Who knew the piss emerald would do this? Back into SANDOPOLIS, I managed to get a weird visual bug where Sonic has a trail following him. I don't mind it since it honestly looks pretty neat. Also, moving on to the background music. Helopes once again graces us with one of the better themes in the game. Absolutely in love with this track and might be my favorite track in the entire game. Besides Pinball Carnival Act 2, which is also my favorite. So, we see the snake in the background before fighting one of the more clever bosses in the game. Eggman decides to be smart this time. After getting hit by so much emerald powers, he stays in the background throughout most of the fight. He tosses platforms at you, then badniks, then burrows below the floor, and then attempt to spike you into the air. There's two ways to damage this guy: deflect the blue badnik that you've seen throughout the zone at him, or dodge his bull digging and bonk him on the head. I do not suggest using any emerald abilities at all, and just follow through with the patterns that Eggman tosses at you. Oh, also the platforms disappear under you after he destroys them, and he tosses extra platforms when they're gone, so I guess that's nice of him. After he gets angry at you, he decides to stop staying there after burrowing in the ground, so the only way to deal damage to him now is to toss badniks back at him. But at this point, it's only really 2 hits. Easy but memorable encounter. And onwards onto... Is this Sonic Forces? Well, we have a factory zone now, where the press actually presses and causes an earthquake throughout the stage. It knocks you high up into the air, moves certain platforms, launches several platforms up, and has some neat sections where you have to time to press, so you don't get into areas that you don't want to be in. Slingshots from Bridge Island Act 2 are back, a reused badnik, one badnik that's harmless, and the other which is super annoying. June decides to hand us more Sonic 4 music this time, and honestly... It ain't bad. It fits the level and isn't repetitive as hell like the boss themes, but it's also super forgettable. I really can't remember any bit of this theme unless I'm actively listening to it. This stage has a very weird mix of Stardust Speedway and, I don't know, any industrial zone. It's relatively open for you to just run through and honestly feels a bit too easy. Now we fight a monkey that's also decided not to deal with emerald powers. This guy mans these pistons which try to flatten you and then leaves himself completely vulnerable. Look, he's definitely sparking here, but this guy is 100% vulnerable while in here. Finish this monkey off, watch the factory explode. Oh yeah, you're in said And behold, a sudden difficulty spike. This drone in the background is super important. Don't let the meter on it to fill up, cause it is very bad if you do so, because the entire stage literally fucking blows up on you like a...
There goes Hawaii, there goes Hawaii, oh there goes Hawaii, the island is gone, there goes Hawaii.
Fortunately, there's these buttons that you can press to alleviate this, but it really sets up some super stressful platforming later on, especially when this level starts putting pistons everywhere that just crush you. And there's these things from Titanic Monarch. And there's this rocket, which is just a visual thing, and just takes you to a different part of the level. You can also watch Sonic clumsily handle it like an idiot. It's also a very, very stupid level on your first playthrough. I should probably get to the music. I don't really have much to say about it, just as forgettable as Act 1, and it's also composed by June. I don't know, we have Piston Egg here, with this giant piston that can instantly kill you by crushing you, until you realize he's stupid enough to be on stage this time, so wail on him with all your Chaos Emerald abilities. And that's the first 7... Quickly backtrack, I'm forgetting something here. Just like the Yellow Emerald, it's a super easy special stage, and it's just the game telling you to quickly get the last emerald. Behold, the final ability, Extra. It's apparently unique to every character. Sonic gets a homing attack, Tails gets a projectile, Knuckles gets a projectile, Amy gets a spammable. Yeah, so it's only really unique on Sonic, and it's just an extra way for you to cheese bosses. And of course you get Super Sonic. Super fast, invincible, demolishes most bosses with ease. Also, you can turn off Super Sonic whenever you please. And you don't get to use any of your Emerald powers while Super is active. They actually also gave him a proper idle animation. I like the Sonic free reference. It's neat. And that's 7 zones, emeralds, this really long script. I'm gonna have a field day trying to edit this and voice over this. Oh my god, this is painful. I'll briefly mention the DLC here as well. Lego is funny. Cool rabbit locked behind a paywall. Why is this a paid feature again? And Amy dressed in the wrong attire for an additional charge even though I pre-ordered the special edition. There's also local multiplayer, but since I'm on PC, I can use remote play. It's absolutely chaotic, and I highly recommend you play this with some friends, since you can seriously screw each other over.
Weed. How dare you stole my weed.
I simply did.
So, overall, what do I think of Superstars? I don't know. It's not an outright terrible game, but I can't say it's great either. Mania has set such a stupidly high standard that it's significantly cheaper than this. We have some really great stuff here, like Bridge Island and Pinball Carnival, but we also get stuff like Lagoon City, some other zones that I'll get into in a second video, because they're later on. And we have the stuff in between. It's such a mixed bag, and the soundtrack is also just all over the place. Not outright terrible, but most of the music doesn't feel like they belong in the same game. Like seriously, listen to the Speed Jungle themes back to back, it's just completely off. I can give this game a 6 out of 10. Don't get me wrong, there's a fun classic Sonic game here, but the price of admission is way too high, and I can't recommend this to anyone unless the game gets a price reduction or a discount. Also, I've barely gotten any glitches, excluding the audio side. Also, can I just mention this offhand? I keep getting recommended these garbage Sonic Superstars videos that are just, I don't know, raw gameplay footage and spoiling endgame bosses at their thumbnails. Like, come on, I got spoiled about and the stupid ass while I was still on Sand Sanctuary when I was scrolling around YouTube. And that was around, what, day 2 or 3 from the game being released? So yeah, that's what I think of Superstars. It's fun, but flawed. Thanks for watching, and I might make a part 2 that goes through the endgame and extra stuff. God kill me.